So how did mindfulness help me to deal with the car crash? So with just a quick overview of what happened. I had my two sons in the car. George was in the front, Louis was in the back behind me. We'd come off the 303 because it was that we could see there was a traffic queue coming up on the sat nav, and so we were on roads that I didn't particularly know. It was windy, and we'd been having these sort of almost flash flood showers, and then it was sort of a bit drier, and essentially we went around a corner, and I turned the steering wheel and nothing happened really, and we just continued on and sort of aquaplaned just as if we'd sort of hit ice almost, straight off the road. And there was no steering, there was no braking. It was just yeah, and we hit a bank, a big sort of 2 foot 3 foot bank, and then sort of took off and then landed with a really hard thump in a ditch, and finally came to a stop.
Nice.
Yeah, I think we might have turned at one point as well before we hit the bank. It certainly felt like a bit of a sort of fairground ride at one point. It was
How
really.
fast were you traveling?
Sorry?
How fast were you traveling at
Well,
the
I
time?
think about 35. We weren't going hugely fast. Well, I didn't think that was fast.
Yeah, it is when you come to a full stop.
Yeah, it is when you come to a full stop without using the usual braking methods. So yeah, we did. And I think because there was this ditch there on the other side of the bank that we sort of toppled into was the sort of final thing, really. So anyway, I'm just going to sort of talk you through the sort of thoughts and that I was aware of, and really in that space, and how it sort of unfolded really, and just bringing out the points I'm hoping might be some learning points. So in that split second when the car came to a stop, I just had this sort of, I felt a wave of fear move through my body. It was a warm sort of top to bottom or bottom to top, I'm not sure what, but it was a sort of heat, a sort of a panic, a sort of wave of dread, if you like. And this question, were the boys okay, was the thought that came with it. And anyway, I mean, it was a very, very sort of split second, not even a second. And then I heard them and they confirmed that they were okay. So that was a real intense sensation at that moment. And then I was focused on getting out the car, and luckily we had some help. Lots of people had arrived. And I had to sort of push up the door and somebody held it, and we sort of clambered out, and they sort of, I think I was actually on somebody's shoulders at one point being carried onto the bank. So there was an off-duty fireman actually who was helping, which was great. So once we were out of the car, I was already starting to observe my thoughts. I had a sense of awareness, and I think because I'm used to observing my thoughts, I sort of was almost thinking to myself, that I shouldn't cling or resist anything. So I was already able to tap into something in that moment. And there were big thoughts like, I could have killed the boys. And the emphasis was really heavily on the I, as in, so that was a sort of bigger thought. And then the smaller thoughts that, God, you look a mess. I've just been camping for a weekend. I had a really old sweatshirt that I don't wear in public, and shock horror, I wasn't even wearing a bra. I mean, I'd literally just crammed everything in the back of the car and was just expecting to arrive home and get the washing on. So how was the mindfulness helpful then? Like I say, I knew not to hold on to the thoughts, especially those big ones. I knew they would come with big emotions, and that was going to sort of, I could get swept away really with those thoughts in that moment. So I knew I had to sort of just gently resist the mind's urge to really create a story around what had just happened, and not allow the mind to go into building this big narrative, which I could feel there was a pull for that. So I kept observing. I remained aware. And I think that's where this sort of daily practice, I was grateful for that really, that I had that awareness. And this became really obvious to me actually with one particular thought that popped up, which just sort of floated past, was the mind suggesting that I wasn't upset enough. Why wasn't I panicking, was the thought. You nearly died, it was sort of saying. These thoughts were coming up in my mind. But it weirdly had the opposite effect, actually, because I was aware of those as thoughts, that it sort of pulled me into a deeper sense of awareness. And I was able to sort of step back from that, really. And I wasn't in a panic, and I was able to then get through the steps that I needed to take. So I wasn't in a passive sort of spaced out, I was very kind of focused. I was able to call somebody to collect us. I called the AA, I called the insurance company, and I was dealing with the scene that was in front of me. The helpers there had already called the ambulance, and the police were on their way and that sort of thing. And, so I was able to calmly assess the boys. I could feel that I was very sort of present. I had a sort of burning across my neck where the seatbelt had taken a bit of skin off, but essentially I was calm and focused. And anyway, the ambulance arrived, and then we had a moment to just sort of sit while we were being checked over. So I was really concerned about the boys. Louis had a bit of a tender stomach where the seatbelt had caught him, and he was, with the car landing on its side, we were both sort of hanging from the seat belts. So yeah, that was this was all coming up, and I sitting there anyway, I was able to reach for my anchor point, the breath. So just sitting in the ambulance, and I'd done this so many times before. So I could feel those sort of sense of fear and the panic sort of beginning to sort of settle, really. And then one of the ambulance crews commented on my blood pressure at that point and said how low it was. And I just lightheartedly said, "Oh, I meditate." And they laughed and said, "Well, it works." So I kind of thought that was when I knew that I built my parachute. And this reminded me of one of my first sessions on my MBCT course at Oxford, where they talk about mindfulness helping with the day-to-day, but also that you're building your parachute for those bigger life events. So how did this help? I avoided creating a narrative. Even after I didn't allow myself to get drawn into the story of what had happened to us, what had happened to me. And I think that can happen in sort of big events. They can almost start to define us. We start to have thoughts like, "Oh, I'm never going to be the same again after this," and maybe some fear of getting into the car, which I certainly did have some nervousness driving again after that. But because I didn't sort of allow it to become a big story that I identified with, I think that was really useful. I was able to self-soothe, and this is one thing that comes from mindfulness practice. So I was able to calm my reactions in the body, and that also, I think, made the boys feel calm around me. And that evening, the whiplash kicked in, and the next morning I could hardly lift my head off the pillow. So I took some pain relief, but I didn't attach to the sensations or the thoughts, that there might be something else going on, if I really damaged something. I was just observing what was there. And I think this has all come out of the practice of not allowing the thought to add to what's actually there. So yeah, it was really useful, actually. And I didn't let my mind hold on to any of that stuff. And it wanted to. I remember that first evening having very sort of visual flashbacks of the bang, and then the sort of crash land into the ditch. And, my mind sort of replaying that over and over again, like as if I was viewing a sort of loop on a film. But that was it. I was just able to view it. And I think that may be part of the primitive brain, that it wanted to work out what had gone wrong, and file it away into those things not to do if you want to stay alive, in a little filing cabinet. So, and that really subsided as well, and was gone really by the next morning. So there was also other fallout as well. You know, I didn't have a car. The boys were heading off on another PGL holiday, sort of 24 hours time. All their clothes were wet and dirty in a broken car somewhere on the Somerset Road. My keys were still in the car. I couldn't get into my house. So, you know, and then days later, there was some shock. I had some concussion, as it turned out. And then I'm still having a little bit of physio on my neck. So, you know, but through all of this, you know, it hasn't really altered my inner state, really. It hasn't dislodged any faith in anything. I've got no nightmares. There's no lingering sort of self-criticism that I, you know, could have done this, I could have done that. The parachute had opened. You know, and you know, I think of it that we did. Yes, there was a hard thud. We landed, and there was some pain, but it, you know, I think, you know, I was able to minimize the suffering, really, and I think that really is down to the mindfulness, really. And I think that's why, you know, I'm doing this and sharing this, because it is available to all of us. It's nothing new. I think it's what the Buddha was talking about, you know, a couple of thousand years ago, when he was looking for a way to end human suffering, that we can observe our minds as a way of managing or limiting suffering. You know, it's not magic, but it does take practice, just like building any skill or any muscle in the body. But I think that's really my conclusion, really, that pain is part of life, but our suffering we can influence, you know, and the tools that mindfulness can offer us can really help with that. So that's it.
That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing. Because it just makes that much of a difference, doesn't it? So how you might be able to sort of build your tools for some other events at some stage.
Yeah. And it was those little moments, like I say, that thought about, especially the thought about you should be panicking more. I was like, well, hold on a moment. Why? You know, and sort of noticing that as a thought, and not needing to do that, not needing to be the victim. Somebody is just, you know, I was shaken up, there's no doubt about it. It was quite a scary event, but I didn't follow those thoughts that could have led me, you know, to another thought after that. And then, you know, because that's where the feelings and the emotions come. And then, you know, suddenly you're feeling something much more potent. But I don't know if that was useful.
Oh, it was great, Tanya. Thank you. And I think you're right about the practice, that you need to do it, because otherwise it wouldn't kick in the same way. But it's enabled you, from listening to what you said, to be in control. And I think that's when we all panic, is when we feel out of control, isn't it? And if you've been able to find some degree of control over all the thoughts that go whistling round your brain when things like that happen, that's really impressive. So yeah, really helpul. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't recommend having an experience like that just to test how your practice is going. Can I just say that? Because it wasn't fun, you know, but we know what life's like. It's got a habit of, you know, we know that these things are going to come, whatever shape or form they're going to take. There's going to be those big life events that knock us sideways. And, you know, I was just really grateful and surprised that, you know, that it was there for me, because I haven't been practicing that long. And I just think, you know, as well as the day-to-day benefits, which I think are huge, that was a real, you know, live, big scenario that any of us can face at any moment, things like that, the big waves, you know. But I think, you know, so I'm going to try and, you know, I don't know, encourage people to sort of maybe, you know, take those moments in your day to just observe, you know, because the more awareness you have of your thoughts, you can get that little gap to open up. And that's where it's not sort of controlling the thoughts, but it gives you that space from, do I want to follow that? Do I want to get sucked into that? You know, whereas if they're very close to you, you're identified with them almost without you realizing, you know, and you're in it. and you're living the thought, and it can be really, it adds more fear to a situation like that. I think if this had happened to me a couple of years ago, I would probably been sort of, I don't want to say hysterical, but I wasn't always the calmest person in the situation like that. So I think, there's some proof there for me. And I just wanted to share that, even though it's a very personal experience, and I don't want to create a big narrative out of it by, but I was so grateful to see that actually I was able to remain calm. And then, like I say, the boys were very calm. And it had a big sort of knock-on effect, really. So
yeah, that's really good. It's because the boys will take their lead from their parents, as they always do, just that's what they'll look to you. So that's a good lesson for them as well.
Yeah, I think so, because again, they were sort of being pulled in as well to that narrative. Certainly my eldest son that night was having, I think he was getting a few of the flashbacks as well, being a little bit older. And it was just like, it's just allowing it, not, I don't know, what people call catastrophizing, where we start to build this big structure around things. And actually, if we sort of resist the urge to sort of cling to that, which is quite seductive for the mind, that space, like, tell the story of how I was in a big, when we nearly died, I mean, do you know what I mean? It's quite sort of a space, and other people want to, ring up, my son, I resisted sharing the photographs because they do look quite dramatic. He put them on a WhatsApp group and people were messaging me, and so that, you can see how that whole story sort of grows, and you can sort of get sucked into that. And it can be quite an emotional space, I think, if you're just pulled along. So it was really beneficial to just sort of deal with what was actually there. So
definitely. Well, thank you though. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed that, my first session.